Alright, let's take a look at the Carolina Panthers and see what did they do in the 2018 off-season. Remember, this is both in free agency and in the draft. But before we do, let's take a look at what their cap situation was at the beginning of the preseason. They had about $15 million, which is not that much in all reality. So they started off in a not particularly great cap situation. By August, they were down to $1.3 million. So very, very little wiggle room there for the Panthers in terms of cap space. But before we talk about what kind of additions they made to their roster, or which guys were contributors last year that were free agents, I want to look at some guys that I thought might be cut in order to increase the amount of available cap space. The first name that came to mind was actually Jonathan Stewart. And the reason is because he wasn't likely to be the lead back anymore with Christian McCaffrey in, and his numbers were starting to fall off. You can see that, for example, in 2011, which is a long time ago, he had 5.4 yards a carry. But even as more recently as 2014, 2015, he had 4.6, 4.1 yards a carry. But then, that yards per carry dropped to 3.4 last season. And then his yards also dropped from 989 in 2015 down to 680. So his, for a 31-year-old running back, it made sense that was going to be the number 2 back. It just made a lot of sense to take the space. So the Panthers saved about $3.75 million by letting him go. And but all was not lost for Jonathan Stewart. Somehow, some way, he managed to get the Giants to give him 2 years and $6.9 million. I was shocked. They did not bring. I don't know what Orleans Darkwa asked for in New York, but the fact that they didn't bring back Orleans Darkwa and they brought in Jonathan Stewart, 31 years old, for 2 years and $6.9 million. I was shocked. But it's good for Jonathan Stewart, but he will not be back with Carolina next season. Fozzie Whitaker was another guy that I thought really was at risk of being cut. You can see that, in the first few years, the last few years rather, he, until last year, he still had really good yards per carry. Still had 4.5, 4.3, 4.6 yards per carry. But then, last season, his yards per carry dropped to 2.6 yards per carry. Only had 18 yards in 12 games last season. So, Fozzie Whitaker's numbers really fell off a cliff. He was maybe the number 4 running back on the depth chart. It would have saved $1.1 million to cut him, but then instead they brought him back. I don't know if they were just waiting to see what kind of shape he would show up in, but he ended up tearing his ACL. So that ended up being very unlucky for the Panthers. But that was a guy I thought probably they should have cut. Russell Shepard is another guy that I thought might get cut, and they did. You can see that he had 202 yards last season, and cutting him saved $1.4 million. On defense, Charles Johnson was a guy that I thought that they might want to cut because he'll be 32 next season. They were able to save $3 million by letting him go, and you can see how his numbers dropped off. He was like a double-digit sack guy there for, about 5 years. He averaged double-digit sacks. Then the last few years, his numbers really dropped off. Had 1 sack, then 4 sacks, but then last year had 0 sacks, 16 tackles and no sacks. So to be able to save $3 million and get out of that contract with a 32-year-old defensive end, it made a lot of sense. Ryan Khalil is another guy that I thought might get cut. I'm not saying I thought he would definitely get cut. He's been with the franchise so long, that those kind of guys, it's really sensitive if you cut them. He said that he was going to retire after this season, so it'll be his last season. He's had some health concerns. He's missed a lot of games the last 2 years. He's 32 years old. It would have saved $4.1 million to let him go, but I think there's just too much emotional attachment. And maybe he can come back and have a bounce-back year. We'll see. Now let's look at the offensive unrestricted free agents. The guys who could have easily signed with any team that they wanted to. The biggest name was Andrew Norwell, okay? He earned a big payday after being the best guard by far in terms of the free agent guards that were, free agents last year. He played on a 1-year second-round tender, got paid $2.7 million, and played so well that he earned a 5-year, $65 million deal with the Jags. So there's just no way, really, that the Carolina Panthers had any chance of bringing him back. Brenton Burson, wide receiver, another free agent. Last year played on a 1-year deal worth $690,000. He only had 128 yards on 8 catches. Never had 200 yards receiving. Never had 15 receptions in a year. So he won't be back next year with Carolina. Ed Dickson, that's a bigger loss, okay? He's going to be 31, so he's no spring chicken, but he played pretty great while replacing Greg Olsen. Really did. Had 437 yards last year. It ended up being a great value for the Panthers because he had been playing on a 3-year deal that averaged $2 million a year, but he got signed away by Seattle, who lost Jimmy Graham. And so Seattle gave Ed Dickson 3 years and $10.7 million. Ed Dixon's no Jimmy Graham, but at the same time, they got to do something at that position. So they decided to pay Ed Dickson, and he won't be back with Carolina. But obviously Carolina has Greg Olsen. That's their number one guy. But to lose Ed Dickson is something that's notable. On defense, who were the unrestricted free agents? Star Lotulelei. That was the big name on defense. That was the free agent. He is a big run-stopping defensive tackle. He played through his rookie contract, including the 5th-year option. And that's another guy that there was just really no way the Panthers could afford to bring him back. I mean, look at this guy does not provide a ton of pass rush. Yeah, he did get 4 sacks in 2016, but last season he had 1.5. Overall he's averaged a couple, 2, maybe really 2 sacks a season, 2.5. And now once again, great against the run, extremely difficult to stop in the run. Trying to block in the run game, but Buffalo gave him 5 years and $50 million. It's unbelievable. Once again, another guy, him and Andrew Norwell, Carolina just didn't have a prayer of bringing back. Julius Peppers will be back. He's opening up the off-season, the preseason on the players unable to perform list, but they think he'll be able to be ready by the time the season starts. Unbelievable. Last season he had 11 sacks at 37 years old. Unbelievable. Since 2002. Okay? Since he joined the league in 2002. He's been in the league for 16 years. 15, 16 years. And since then, he had one season where he had fewer than 7 sacks. Wow. He's number 4 on the all-time list. He very well could end up at number 3 on the all-time, number 3 or number 4, I can't remember. It's just incredible. Definitely first ballot future Hall of Famer. Citing for Julius Peppers to keep playing at 38 years old. Last year he played on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. And you have to say he earned every penny of it. Jarius Byrd finally is another free agent. 32 years old, will be 32 years old. He was a backup safety, didn't play a lot of snaps, was playing on a 1-year, $900,000 deal. What can he realistically still do? All right, let's summarize all of the major changes to the Panthers roster. Derek Anderson is out as a backup to Cam Newton. Taylor Heineke is in. At running back, Jonathan Stewart is out. And C.J. Anderson is in. That is an upgrade in my eyes. You know, I don't know if C.J. Anderson is as good as Jonathan Stewart in his prime, but I think he's as good as Jonathan Stewart is at 31 years old. So that's exciting. Kenyon Barner is another guy who's going to be in. But C.J. Anderson, that's a huge pickup. I really love that move. You can see he had 1,000 yards rushing, 4.1 yards a carry, never had below 4 yards a carry. I was really surprised Denver let him go. I think this is a great move by Carolina. I really do. And they got him cheap. At wide receiver, Kelvin Benjamin is gone. They traded him to Buffalo last year. Russell Shepard is gone, the number 3 wide receiver, and Kalen Clay is gone. He had under 100 yards receiving last year, and it was his best year he ever had. So what did the Panthers do to try to replace those guys? Well, they brought in Torrey Smith from Philadelphia. I think they traded for Torrey Smith. That will be interesting to see. You can see Kelvin Benjamin's numbers there below. He had 941 yards receiving in 2016. Was on pace to have another 950 yards. You know, the big story was that he criticized Cam Newton and said, what could I have done if I had a more accurate passer? Interesting move to criticize his old quarterback, especially when he had Tyrod Taylor and only had 217 yards in 6 games. So, I don't know. I think Kelvin Benjamin's going to regret that. He's playing on a 5th-year option there in Buffalo, but I think he's going to look silly. And I don't think Cam Newton is... You know, I mean, sure, he did win an MVP, so there, you can only say so much shit about a guy who won an MVP, but... so much crap, excuse me, but I think... You know, at the same time, he's not really a great passer. He certainly wasn't a great passer last season. He's never had 60% completion percentage. So I certainly think there is some truth to the fact that, you know, Cam Newton is not a great quarterback. He's a great athlete. But is he a great quarterback? I don't know. But, you know, if you're going to be talking smack, then you should be able to back it up. And I don't know that Buffalo has a quarterback that's going to let Kelvin Benjamin back it up. But Torrey Smith will be in. I do not think that is a comparable. Now, once again, I don't think that the Panthers are expecting Torrey Smith to be a number 1 wide receiver at this point. Certainly not. I think they're maybe expecting him to be a number 3 wide receiver or number 2, number 3. So he could possibly do that. They drafted DJ Moore in the 1st round. That's pretty big. But how much is he going to be able to contribute as a rookie? That's a question. Now, and even in the long term, you know, he's more of a speed kind of guy. So he, you know, that'll help stretch the field and whatnot. But we'll see how polished he is. A lot of people were very high on DJ Moore. I'm not quite as convinced, but we'll see. He's got a lot of upside. And Jarius Wright. They brought in Jarius Wright. So there is Torrey Smith's numbers. You can see had huge numbers with Baltimore in 2013, but they've been basically more or less going down. He had 36 catches for 430 yards as the number 3 guy, number 4 guy in Philadelphia. And Jarius Wright, you can see he had some decent seasons back in 2013 through 2015. Last year had 198 yards in all 16 games. So I don't know. I'd say that the Panthers upgraded at wide receiver for sure. Definitely upgraded at wide receiver. At tight end, Ed Dixon is out, but Greg Olsen will be back. You know, he had 1,000-yard seasons for 3 years in a row until last season. Ian Thomas, they drafted him in the 4th round, and they brought in Jason Vanderlaan, who is a reserve player. So, I don't know. Losing Ed Dixon's going to hurt, but depending on how Ian Thomas does, the Panthers, might have enough depth there. Andrew Norwell out. That is a loss for sure. And they brought in Jeremiah Searles, who was a backup last season. At defensive end, Charles Johnson is out. That is somewhat of a loss, but he was kind of towards the end of his rope. And they drafted Deshaun Hall in the 3rd round and Marquise Haynes in the 4th round. So, hey, look, the Panthers have an incredible defensive line. And you'd expect that they'll continue to really train and improve these guys that they're bringing in the 3rd or 4th round and get them ready to play in a couple of years. So I'd say overall, heck, they may have improved at defensive end. At defensive tackle, Star Lotulelei is gone, but they brought in Dontari Poe. I think it's about the same. Now listen, Lotulelei got a 5-year, $50 million deal. Poe got like a 3-year, $27 million deal, something like that. So Lotulelei's deal was longer and for slightly more money, not much more, but slightly more money per year. I think it'll really depend on how healthy Poe can be. If Poe can stay healthy, I think there will be no major drop-off. He's not quite as good as Lotulelei is against the run, but next to Quan Short, God, the Panthers have a really good defensive line, honestly. At linebacker, Jeremiah Carter, they drafted him in the 5th round and Andre Smith in the 7th round. So they got some depth there at linebacker. At corner, Daryl Worley, the number 2 corner last year. He was a 3rd round pick in 2016. They traded him to Philadelphia for Torrey Smith. And then, immediately after getting to Philadelphia, Daryl Worley got arrested for DUI and felony gun possession. So that wasn't good. They cut him immediately. And instead, Daryl Worley got signed by Oakland because Oakland will take anybody. It doesn't matter, who you murdered or who whatever. Oakland is a home for you. I say that jokingly. Kind of. But, Oakland has been known to take a risk on guys who have been arrested before. So they gave him a 1-year, $638,000 deal, but he won't be back with Carolina. So Daryl Worley's out, but Dante Jackson is in. They drafted him in the 2nd round. So that's not bad. Depending on how he does, that could easily at least hold steady, even in his rookie year. They also brought in Russ Cockrell, who had a pretty good year at the end of his rookie contract. And he got a 2-year, $6.8 million deal. And then Lorenzo Doss, who was a reserve player. So, not bad. I'd say overall, heck, Panthers might have upgraded the corner. And at safety, they let Kirk Coleman go, which was surprising. He was going to be 30 years old this upcoming season. You can see his interceptions dropped from 7 in 2015 to 0 last year. Didn't play great in coverage, so I get that. Jarius Byrd also won't be back. He was a former Pro Bowler with Buffalo, but not very good with New Orleans and was a reserve player with Carolina. But instead, they brought in Denoris Searcy, who was a backup last season and drafted Rashawn Golden in the 3rd round. Look, I'd say overall the Panthers definitely probably improved on defense. I would say so. At safety, I wouldn't say they had a big improvement, but I don't think they had a drop off. Not the way Kurt Coleman played last year. At cornerback, I'd say they at least held steady, maybe improved at corner. Linebacker, at least got some depth. At defensive tackle, at least held steady, almost held. Maybe there's a little bit of a decline, but not really. Nothing majorly noticeable. And then defensive end, maybe even an upgrade based on where Charles Johnson was in his career. So I think the Panthers had a good offseason, actually. I really do. Across the board, I think they upgraded at wide receiver. Now, losing Andrew Norwell hurt. And losing Ed Dixon hurt a little bit. I'd say the biggest loss by far for the Panthers is Norwell. So that's going to be the biggest question mark for their team is, can they fill that hole? And then other than that, their really good defense got even a little bit better. So Panthers should have a shot at a playoff spot. Can they win that division? I don't think so, man. I mean, listen, I respect this team. I think the Panthers have a good team. They got a new offensive coordinator. Norv Turner is in. That should be exciting. I'm a big Norv Turner fan. It should be a good year for the Panthers. I do think that. And I think they have as good of a shot. I think they and the Packers probably have the best chance of winning that final playoff spot. I really do. Out of all the teams in the the NFC, I think those two teams are going to be competing along with maybe the 49ers, those 3 teams for the final playoff spot. But, when you look at the Saints and when you look at the Falcons, it's hard. Now, listen, the Panthers could win the division. They got a really great defense, and they could have a good offense. But if you look at the Saints and you look at the Falcons, it's hard to say that the Panthers are definitely going to win the division. Very, very hard to say. Saints look very, very strong. Falcons look very, very strong. But the Panthers look good too. It's going to be another great year in the NFC South, which is exciting. If you're a fan of a team in the NFC South, it's exciting to have 3 teams. I mean, it's always fun to be like the Patriots and just beat everyone's ass in your division every year. The Dolphins suck and Jets are horrible and the Buffalo's not very good. So yeah, that's fun. Okay, you just like 6 wins right off the bat. But it's a different kind of fun to have 3 great teams in a division and know that you're going to have some amazing divisional games every year. So NFC South going to be great this year. Panthers going to be very good this year, and it should be interesting to watch. If you like this video, please click subscribe because we are going to have some incredible videos this year. At the end of the preseason, we're going to break down the final rosters of all 32 teams. And then each week, we're going to preview the upcoming week's games and then review the previous week's games. So it is going to be great. Definitely click subscribe because you do not want to miss some of the best coverage of the NFL on YouTube. Thank you.